Okay, so we're here at the integrated multi-trophic aquaculture site, Kyuquot Seafoods, Dr. Steve Cross, and we thought we'd just give you a bit of an update on the kelp and how that was all looking. This kelp is grown and spawned and babied along by our resident, or sometimes not available, but generally resident kelp expert Nathan Blasco. It's on my left here. And what are we, Nathan, about 3 weeks from maybe harvesting some of this stuff?
Yeah, we're about 3 weeks away from harvesting. This is from kelp seed that we put in December. And we're here, it's now the middle of May or towards the end of May, and we're starting to see some nice growth. We've gone through we're right in the middle of our big growth period in May and June, which is where we stand now. We're going to be harvesting fairly soon, and so you'll see by the time we harvest, our line here will be a little bit darker in color and a little bit bigger.
Yeah,
so
probably twice the length, maybe, even if we haven't had a lot of sun, Nathan, this
not
this
too
May.
much sun. Yeah, so this is typical, but I would say a little bit less than what we should be expecting for this point right now. So here we have our kelp line, and what you can see here is this light white twine, and that's what we actually inoculate with the original spore solution from mature kelp blades from last, I guess it would have been last October. We get those spores to settle on this little twine, and in the lab cultures we get those little spores to develop into tiny little guys of this. And then we outplant here, and come May, this is what we get. And so from that stands now, we see, I wasn't a part of it, but the production manager Rusty Smith here, he was part of what they've been doing for the last little while to promote the growth, is what they call their weeding procedures.
Yeah, so weeding is as the sunshine starts increasing in late March and early April, we start getting a bunch of real fine, I guess it
would be like filamentous algae.
Filamentous algae.
I don't know what kind, but
and the little kelp plants, they're there all the way through from when we seed them out, when Nathan brings them out after he's inoculated and actually created them on this little wee kelp line. They're tiny, almost, you can see them, but they're very small, and they stay like that for all through the winter time. We put these out before the shortest day. In fact, these guys are a little late, but generally December the 21st you want to have it in by on this stuff, and you don't really see any growth diving or looking at the lines or anything really up until, you see a little tiny bit, but even in the middle of March it's still only that long. And what happens then is that filamentous growth gets all over it. So we came up with a method of weeding the kelp to keep that off, because it seemed to us that it was stifling this kelp's ability to see the sunlight. So basically all that is lifting up the lines and dropping them at speed, which really in the long run was Nathan's idea. We tried to do it a few different ways, even tried to wash it off underwater with dive paddles, and that became an obviously tedious event. So Nathan said, well, the holdfasts are pretty strong and we should be able to just pick it up and drop it, and we tried that, and a lot of the filamentous stuff flew off, and so that became our new method. And got to thank, really, it's been Sam and Keith on the weekend, pretty much every weekend now for the last 3 or 4 weeks, well, until these were starting to grow pretty good, and then you can stop weeding because the stuff just takes over and the filamentous stuff doesn't have a chance. So we've learned a little bit about it, but it's all been a fair bit of trial and error, and maybe if I've got time at the end of this, I'll show you some of the errors we had, and late harvesting and letting the snails get on and having them eaten right back. And it's been a learning curve, but that's what it's all about, is the learning curve. So this is really Nathan's project, the whole kelp thing, and Dave and I have been here for the operational side of it, helping sort of set up and how we think it would hold, given that we've got to set it up so we've got two meters between each line and at the right depth. And one of the problems we had was that if you don't keep tension on each line, once you get this much biomass floating around in the current, the lines will actually start doing this and crossing each other, and these guys near the end of, they're pretty ratty, they can break off, so you don't really want that a lot. So we had to work out a way of keeping them separated, keeping them taut, weeding them, and of course let alone the scientific side of it, which is which is actually sporing them and getting them to grow on these lines and having them ready to go out to a production site. So a really interesting part of the project, the idea being that, you know, this stuff picks up the ammonias. So yeah, and another couple of 3 weeks we'll be harvesting this lot. You know, this gap is caused by us pulling this up by hand. When we get to harvest, we do it a little bit more carefully than we've just done for this video. But hopefully we'll get some of that footage for you as well. Stay tuned. Dr. Stephen Cross's, hopefully Dr. Nathan's eventually. Integrated multi-trophic aquaculture, west coast of Canada, Kyuquot Sound.